land humming with youthful energy, a sanctuary of nature and beauty, an inspiration for the soul. Here live peoples ancient and modern, constantly creating, perpetually on the move. Here, in the Holy Land. This is Jerusalem, the homeland of the Spirit, the foundation stone of faith. Home to three great religions, the birthplace of the belief in one God. It was in this land that Jesus was born, grew into adulthood, and ministered to his flock. It was here that he sacrificed himself on the cross so that we might be saved. The sound of his voice echoed across the hills and valleys of this holy land. It still does. It was God's voice that told Abraham to leave his home in distant Ur for a land promised him and his descendants. And so the shepherds of old crossed the desert wastes. In Beersheba, the city of 7 wells, they watered their flocks. Even today, Beersheba's ancient tale reveals to us the scope and nature of the dwellings of yesteryear, an introduction to the ancient Holy Land, revealed from beneath the sands of time. Among the ancient oak trees of Mamre, they made their home, in the place that would come to be known as Hebron. Here, Abraham purchased a burial cave, a final resting place for him and his descendants, Isaac and Jacob and their wives. Later surrounded by a monumental structure, the Cave of the Patriarchs remains a sacred gathering place for Jews and Arabs, the children of Abraham. The timeless oaks of Mamre, how many generations of history have they witnessed? The ageless olive trees of the Holy Land, the family trees of all mankind. Their twisted roots and trunks take us back in time, to the days when the prophet Isaiah foretold the coming of a Messiah from the house of David.
For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. He will reign on David's throne. Hail, O favored one, the Lord is with you.
The mountains of Galilee, and nestled among them, the city of Nazareth. In the days of the Bible, it was just a tiny village of no great standing. Today, it's a major urban hub, a city shared in peace by Jews and Arabs. 2,000 years ago, the people of Nazareth lived in houses like this, simple, humble dwellings built by their own hands and filled with their handiwork. In one of those houses lived a carpenter named Joseph, from the family of David, betrothed to a virgin named Mary, in Hebrew, Miriam. These were people who lived on the land, people for whom hard physical work was the key to existence. Such dwellings allow us to imagine their world, their thoughts, their dreams. The magnificent Church of the Annunciation marks the site where the angel Gabriel came to Mary. In the ancient cave beneath today's basilica, he delivered his news.
And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call him Jesus.
In this modernistic structure, reaching heavenward, we exalt the name of God and give thanks for his gift to mankind. Excited and mystified by that heavenly message, Mary traveled south to Ein Karem, in the hills alongside Jerusalem, to visit her cousin. Elizabeth was carrying the child who would come to be known as John the Baptist.
My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior.
The Church of the Visitation immortalizes their encounter. "Blessed are you among women," said Elizabeth. "My soul magnifies the Lord," replied Mary, "and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior." The Magnificat, Mary's prayer of thanksgiving, is emblazoned on these church walls. To this day, the hills around Ein Karem resound with Mary's words. Each year, Christian faithful from around the world gather here for a festival of religious liturgy, enjoying the inspiring beauty of the Magnificat, set to music. In those days, 2,000 years ago, Rome ruled the Holy Land. Caesarea on the Mediterranean seashore was the Roman administrative capital for what was then the territory of Judea. Today, Caesarea is one of the Holy Land's principal tourist attractions. Among these ancient ruins, left behind by Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, and Crusaders, visitors can easily sense the grandeur of those distant days. Here, alongside the Via Maris, the old sea road, are the remnants of the once great port city. Today, Caesarea is home to pleasant seaside restaurants and small shops selling art and handicrafts. But for those who want to touch history with their own hands, Caesarea's ongoing archaeological excavations are the most exciting attraction of all. A place where volunteers are invited to take part in the work of discovering the past. Among the most recent finds here was the room in which St. Paul was imprisoned before sailing off to Rome and martyrdom. Among Caesarea's shattered columns, one bears the fragment of an inscription, the name of the Roman governor who once lived here, the same man who would later condemn Jesus to die on the cross, Pontius Pilate.
And Joseph went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem.
It was a Roman census that forced Joseph to return to Bethlehem, the city of his birth. Heavy with child, Mary went with him. Ancient Bethlehem, the city of David, was much like its modern counterpart, a thriving center of trade on the main road between Jerusalem and Hebron. Shepherds and their flocks roamed the surrounding fields. It was here that Mary would give birth, for when her time came, there was no room for them.
And she laid him in a manger because there was no room at the inn.
Jesus would be born in a humble manger. Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity, the oldest in the Holy Land, is built atop the site where the miracle of that first Christmas took place. In a grotto beneath the church, a small chapel marks the place of Jesus' birth, on this very spot. On that night, local shepherds were watching over their flocks when an angel appeared. "Do not be afraid," he told them, "for I bring you good news."
Glory to God in the highest, and on the earth, peace among men.
Each year, Bethlehem's Manger Square is the scene of Christmas joy as Christian faithful from around the world gather together to celebrate the birth of the Savior. This is the Christmas spirit of the modern Holy Land. Each Christmas Eve, exactly at midnight, Mass is celebrated in Bethlehem's St. Catherine's Basilica, a celebration of the ancient miracle that brought new hope to an entire world. Eight days later, the newborn boy was circumcised and given the name Yeshua. In Hebrew, it means salvation. As the long-awaited Messiah, Jesus would save his people from their sins. Wise men from the east arrived to pay Jesus homage.
Where is the newborn King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we have come to worship him.
When word of Jesus' birth reached King Herod in Jerusalem, the monarch was enraged. Determined to rid himself of any potential opponent, Herod ordered the death of all Jewish boys in Bethlehem under the age of 2.
Rise, take the child and his mother, and escape to Egypt.
An angel warned of imminent danger. Fleeing Bethlehem, Mary paused to suckle her child, an event remembered in the milk grotto. From there, they headed into the desert, bound for Egypt. These endless wastes were familiar to the people of the ancient Holy Land, a place of refuge and religious inspiration. Tradition says they stopped to rest at this spot in the Judean wilderness, today enshrined by the monastery of Nebi Musa. To this day, the desert wastes reverberate with the echoes of Christian belief, signs of the presence of the faithful who would follow. The impressive ruins at Avdat in the Negev desert include remnants of once majestic Byzantine churches, outposts of faith shrouded in the mists of time. Who did the Holy Family meet on their way through the wilderness? From then until now, these harsh climes have been home to nomadic Bedouin tribes. The Bedouin of Israel's Negev desert preserve traditions dating back thousands of years, living their lives at ground level. Famous for their hospitality, the Bedouin offer a warm welcome to modern visitors.
Rise, take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel.
By the year 4 BC, Herod was dead. The Holy Family made its way from Egypt back to the land of Israel. Bypassing Bethlehem, they moved up the Mediterranean coast, passing near ancient Ashkelon, where Samson had brought down the temple upon his Philistine captors. Further along the way, they came upon the ancient port city of Jaffa, today a part of modern Tel Aviv. Old Jaffa is today a thriving center of tourism, a prestigious artists' colony, the site of numerous galleries and jewelry workshops. Here, tourists are surrounded by more than 4,000 years of history. It was from Jaffa's port that Jonah set out to sea, only to be swallowed by a whale. It was among these winding alleys at Simon the tanner's house that Peter, a future disciple, would have a vision of the gospel going to all nations. As they continued on their way toward Nazareth, tradition says that Mary, Joseph, and Jesus sought shelter in a cave at the foot of Mount Carmel, not far from where Elijah had slain the false prophets of Baal.
They returned into Galilee to their own city, Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom.
Finally, they were home. Among the Galilee hills, the young Jesus would grow up surrounded by nature and beauty in the midst of history and tradition. Dominated by the fortress city of Megiddo, the nearby Jezreel Valley had been the scene of great biblical battles. In the end of days, says the book of Revelation, this would be the scene of the Battle of Armageddon, the final conflict on earth between good and evil. Among these breathtaking ruins, contemporary pilgrims find themselves face to face with an entire heritage of faith. From Nazareth, Jesus could easily see the mountains of Gilboa, where King Saul had been killed fighting the Philistines. Even closer was Mount Tabor, later to become the site of Jesus' transfiguration before the disciples Peter, James, and John. In Nazareth, Jesus would have learned the trade of carpentry alongside his father Joseph. The Church of St. Joseph marks the traditional site of his workshop. Another church encloses an ancient